I'm going to start with something curmudgeonly. Who pays $80 or more for a ticket to Cirque du Soleil and then shows up late after the performance has begun in a faded out camo t-shirt and raggedy ass cargo shorts, and then can't sit the whole first hour, has to get up 20 minutes after they get there already late and go get more beer? My God, thanks so much. Who spends that kind of money on that kind of ticket and then shows up late? Damn, I'd want to get there early, make sure I got my money's worth. All right, rant aside. Many things to talk about tonight. Hardly know where to begin. I'll start with this, though. I learned, much to my chagrin, that it wasn't some sneaky little bitch that turned me in for the music that we had on Curmudgeons in cars. It was apparently a program that runs through and flags anything that it recognizes. So I guess I got flagged by Facebook, who can be a sneaky little bitch when it wants to be also. In any event, we changed all the music out. We republished or reposted with the new music. It's all completely legal. And so that's that. Now, I got a bunch of questions I'm going to answer tonight, which are going to require me putting on my specs so I can read them, because I want to read them in their entirety so you know exactly what I'm answering, okay? Sounds more fair. Okay. All right, here's one. Just read the blog entry about OD&D. Nice work. Okay, this one comes from, this guy's a late arrival, catching up. Have you ever talked about the OD&D combat system in a blog? I've always felt like people don't understand what a melee round is, and that OD&D was a simulation of a period in time which both sides are parrying and ducking and dodging or hoping to get a hit in. All the new systems are so detailed it's more like wargaming, which ties in with your recent blog about rulings. I totally get it that it was your job to make AD&D, but you prefer OD&D. I had all the books, but never played AD&D either. Seems like once AD&D come out, I always had players trying to interrupt my DMing and quote rules at me. Well, that's good. And then ruminate on it. I'm arguing with someone about it still. I call the new war game style 6, 10-second marine, 6, 10-second melee round time slicing. Okay. I will, yeah, man, that was a bad flare. Better adjust my light here. Hang on a second. I didn't realize I had to put in a new bulb. I must have changed the angle of the dangle here or something. I'll change it back a little. Sorry, got to see my fine Gary Con Hawaiian shirt there, didn't you? Yeah, I got to thank the Gygax family, the Sibs, the Offspring again for giving me this shirt. It's a beauty. Wore it to Cirque tonight. Fit right in with all the other wild shirts people feel compelled to wear there. Anyway, back to where I was. Where was I? Oh, yeah, combat, before my glasses flared out. I used to try to explain combat rounds to people as a stroboscopic effect. Okay? If a whole bunch of people were just flailing away on each other in a dark room, and you flick the lights on every 6 seconds or every 10 seconds, or, whatever you break it down into, that's what you'd see. Okay, you would just, okay. And that's kind of what we tried to do. We tried to stop action, as this question very capably states, and it is, everybody's dodging, weaving, dodging, weaving the whole time. It's just, okay, stop. What happens? Your turn. Poke or no poke, we'll get poked, whatever. That's kind of what we were trying to get through to people, was the best bar fight in a Western movie you ever saw that you could edit yourself and stop and stop and stop and start. Okay, that's really how I tried to used to try to explain it. I still think it somewhat holds up. I still use an initiative roll that effectively breaks up the turn or the round. I don't get into the semantics of how many rounds in a turn and all that crap. The segment of time that we're dealing with at this moment, call it what you will. It's just 10-sided die. Everybody rolls. Zeros go first and nines go last. And when I'm rolling for monsters, if I have the same number as players, I let the players strike first, and if the players manage to kill the monster before he gets his turn, it's fine with me. Of course, when they're fighting an ogre, or and the ogre keeps rolling ones and twos, somebody's liable to get beat on. But that's the easiest way I know to do it. Somebody says they're going to, okay, everybody's got their number rolled, and somebody says, well, I'm going to fire an arrow. And I say, okay, add 4 to your die roll without even knowing what their die roll is. Because that's not something they had. They didn't tell me that they had a knocked arrow, sitting there resting on their bow when they went in, or they've already shot. Okay. So it's a loosey-goosey thing, I'll grant you. But I've always felt comfortable with it because it has an interior logic, I feel, that makes it easier to understand and accept. Now, there's been some interesting responses along these lines, all concerning fighting. Here we are back to the great shibboleth, hit points. And someone said, go watch an MMA fight, Tim. You will realize your concept of hit points has no relation to reality. Well, number one, dude, we're playing a fantasy game here. Come on. Reality? We simulate, sort of. Realism, sort of. It's fantasy. It's a game. It's not real. Now, let's parse this. We used to do brawling rules. I don't know if they're still there. I don't know if they put them out, published them in a magazine article, whatever. But if you were going to go hand to hand, fist to fist, there was a way to do that. MMA is that. Hand to hand, fist to fist, or foot to abdomen. Okay, bullshit. Someone made the counterpoint to this comment on one of the videos that, yeah, that's all well and good until you get a sword poked into your stomach. This isn't MMA. That's not what we're talking about. If you want to brawl, go brawl. As I recall, as a house rule, we used to do, I think we used to use a 6-sider as possible damage, and then we just rolled against each other, bam, 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 to see how many punches landed. We weren't into simulating boxing. I guess if you wanted to have a fist fight, we could simulate that. It's not MMA. Somebody else responded to one that they like to think of their players as superheroes. Somehow they managed to fall at 100 feet and not die. Yay, go on. That's it. It's fantasy. A willing suspension of disbelief. Those people that cling to what they think reality should be really aren't getting what I think is the fun aspect of gaming. And then that is kind of to reality. We're having fun. We're fantasy. For Christ's sake, you're flying on a carpet. Give me a break. MMA. Get real. You people that are hung up on hit points, do whatever the hell you want with them. I don't care. Some of you are so anal and retentive in some of these arguments that I'm just astonished. Do what you want. I've never once, in any of these blogs or any of my old written blogs, said that you were doing something wrong. You being anybody out there listening to this. Never said that. I've only ever said, this is the way I do it. This is the way we did it, or this is what we meant when we did it, back when I was writing this stuff. So if you want to gaze at your navel until your spine snaps on these problem of hit points, go right ahead. I got better things to do. Like the next question, after I get a little do. Still no sponsors. All right, let's see. What do we go for next? I may have to use these if it flares out. Sorry. Yeah, okay. Here's a response. In regard to hit points and falls and all that, I like to think of characters as accident heroes, knocked down, bloody, and near death, then up kicking ass in the next scene. Don't overthink it. It also baffles me at times that this generation with internet access can't seem to Google search for information and apply logic to see if the source is credible. Well, yes, you got me on that one too. All right, let's go next. All right, I got someone here that wanted to talk about plagiarism and copyrights and stuff. And something about a gentleman I don't have any interest in figuring out in this question. But I do have, I'll read part of it to you. Is it wrong to talk about these issues of plagiarism against Leonard Pat? It's apparently documented on John Peterson's website, Playing in the World. And I have no idea about this gentleman. And then he goes on to say, or Gygax has repeated copyright value violations against D.R. Burroughs' estate and the Tolkien estate. Okay, I'll address that part of the question right now. We were given C&Ds. We were never sued. We never had to pay any damages. At this point in time, the American copyright laws were in a great state of flux. New stuff then that was new was stretching the old laws. Shortly after I began at TSR, basically the entire copyright code underwent an overhaul and has been redone now. We operated under different rules then. Fair use was a really loosey-goosey concept. And most of the time people didn't care, but Burroughs' estate was very diligent. And they said, hey, quit doing that. And we said, yo, okay. Didn't know you were going to get upset. Okay. It's not like they ever made a ton of money on it. Edgar Rice Burroughs at the time was 20 years past his prime in terms of being in the public eye. Not that that made a difference to use it or not, but that shows the diligence of the estate. 20 years later, they're still looking. And we said, okay, fine. And so Warriors of Barsoom or whatever that was pulled. And I honestly believe in the early days, those real early ones, pre-TSR, when it was Tactical Studies Games, I really don't believe any of that was done intentionally. Now, ignorance isn't an excuse, but it can be a reason. I really don't think so. The Burroughs people, the Tolkien people, there again, there's still an argument that could be made that there was no valid copyright on the Tolkien product because for 8 or 9 years before we got C&D'd by the Tolkien people, there had been bootleg copies of all the Lord of the Rings books in The Hobbit, sold in every head shop in America. They were basically bootleg copies of the Ballantine edition, I think. In any event, the copyright law now says that if somebody violates and you don't go after them right away and you know about it, if you don't go after them right away, you can't go after them later. Wasn't that way then. Tolkien said, stop. Okay, we did. They were nice enough. We sold off what was already in print and already in the stores. And the next print, the deal with them, as I recall, was next print run, that'll be taken out. It was never intentional theft. It was certainly never to burnish the image of the game. To Moorcock had a problem with Elric. Okay, that was a case of somebody else already had the rights. We had rights to Elric at one point, I think it was Elric. We, TSR, after I left. The company had rights, and then Chaosium bought some counter rights, and paperwork was lost, and copyright was just a muddle back then. One of the biggest headaches that Hasbro received, courtesy of me, I'm so glad, though it was purely unintentional. I can't take complete credit for it. Copyrights with the Dragon and Little Wars magazine, and also with Strategic Review when I was there. We bought rights of first publication with an option to reuse it again later if we did a best of compilation with a honorarium to be paid in that instance. That's all we ever did. TSR did not own the content that wasn't theirs already in that magazine. They thought they did. Nobody ever asked me after I left. All my authors and my artists knew, because that was standard practice. Doesn't matter if it was a guy, an 18-year-old kid writing his very first article for Dragon Magazine, or it was Fritz Leiber publishing a new book. That's the way it worked. So by today's standards, it certainly looks like theft. But in the muddled state of the copyright laws in the 70s, it was, it went into some gray areas, but no more gray areas than a lot of other things went into. Of course, we were successful, so those show up. But no, theft, no. Plagiarism, no, it's not plagiarism. More of an homage. Certainly not plagiarism. That's using someone else's work, their words, their writing, their research, not their characters. Now it is. Wasn't then. We were part of the sea change. Just one of many people caught up in this change of legal crap back then. So again, it's so easy to judge today, but if you don't know what was going on back then, somebody else asked me about I prefer OD&D over AD&D. Well, let me clarify that a little. What I play, the version I play, is what we felt OD&D was going to. More sophisticated, broader, more encompassing, other stuff in it, not just slogging through a dungeon, killing crap behind every other door, as we'd all started out as. It was more sophisticated. I play AD&D in that AD&D was always the goal, in that I play with this rule I like, and I eschew that rule I don't, and I modify this one, but I'm consistent. People in my games, especially in my campaign, know that a given thing's going to work the same way every time. So I'm not inconsistent. I may make up a house rule, but I'll apply it equally and fairly all the way through. So that's really what we were looking for. It was only later that we realized we had to codify a set that we could make rules so we could run tournaments and people would quit spending endless hours arguing about the diameter of spider silk and which spider did a bigger one. One of those things. We made rules lawyers out of the players when we published the 3 AD&D books. You're right. We did. Well, we wanted to sell books, and we needed it. Let's see. We're here. Let's find something else here. Oh, here we go. Yeah, there was that. And I talked about that. I don't, to wrap this plagiarism crap up, I don't really feel that we're glossing over anything we did. We've never tried to hide our mistakes. We corrected them right away. And they were mistakes. They weren't, my God, if we were going to be thieves, we could have found something that made us a hell of a lot more money. Think about that. It's going to be one of those evenings, I'm afraid. Okay, I have to believe there was some sort of favoritism. This is in quotes. When Mr. Gygax and yourself sat down to divide the original rules into what's now basic in AD&D, I'd like to hear what motivated the two of you to decide what parts went with each set, and if you had anything to do, if anything you would have changed after the fact. Well, yeah, there are lots of rules arguments I lost with Gary, but hey, it was his game, and that's what I was there to do, was argue with him and tweak him. How to begin this? No, we weren't. There's another question later on that this will address, so I'll wrap the two together somewhat. We set out to make a basic that was a sanitized version for children. Less emphasis on killing, more emphasis on defeating. Less emphasis on fireballs and lightning bolts, and more emphasis on webs and, some patches of oil. And, we were aging it down. No demons and devils, and stuff like this, because we were looking at a new market in a number of different ways. Number one, new people to buy the game, younger person, because my God, the original was so hard to read. And even AD&D we didn't write for youngsters. We didn't write for non-gamers. We wrote basic for youngsters. We wrote it for non-gamers, a simple, fast, slide into it type of experience. Sanitized, yes. For a reason, a very best of reasons. We were aiming it at children. Now, yeah, we could have. We learned that we wouldn't have done very well trying to fill our books full of naked ladies and sell all the 13-year-old boys on buying the books. We already learned that one with the cover that nearly killed the brand that I've talked about before. We were, I don't want to say dumbing it down, but we were aging it down. If you gave me a textbook today that was meant for a 10th grade class and said convert it to a 6th grade class, that's kind of what we did. We didn't dumb it down. We aged it down. We didn't get into tons of intricate detail. We got into the basics, knowing that if they like this, they'll come buy the other one. That's marketing, baby. That's marketing. So, were there things? Oh, yeah. The only argument I actually won was Magic Missile. There were lots of other little arguments that I thought we could do this to that or, whatever. But yeah, there were probably, to be honest, to be fair to Gary, there were probably lots of little things that I did win on. Who remembers the stuff you won on in some case like that? You remember the ones you lost. I do remember Magic Missile, however, but it was not any evil scheme other than we're going to make one for older kids and adults, and we're going to make one for younger kids. Now, there was some thought in the brain trust, which was about a brain and a half, Gary's brain and then Brian. And I was never privy to these discussions. I was never, at this point in time, I was never privy to this. There are these top level discussions on what are you going to do about this and what are we going to do about that. Okay, that wasn't my place. I don't know why they thought I don't know why they thought it would be a good idea. And I would have advised them against it. They thought that they could continue to pay Arneson on the basic because, quite frankly, a lot of what was published was not Arneson. It's one thing to come up with an idea. It's another thing to be able to utter that idea, to put it into words. And it's another thing altogether to refine it so that others can understand it with a minimal of explanation. Dave had lots and lots of ideas. Dave was very, very poor at communicating his ideas. He didn't have the communication skills. I was called to task because the GaryCon publicity says it calls Gary the father of role playing, and that's a lie because where's Dave and all that. Well, I don't think it's a lie unless it's a lie of omission. I'm not getting into the argument again of who deserved what. I've made this plain before. I thought at the very beginning when I came to TSR, right after I had done the Blackmore supplement and seen the quality of Dave's work and found out that he was getting an equal royalty with Gary, I damn near put a load in my trousers. I'm sure it was a reaction, although I wouldn't have said it out loud. I'm sure inside that little guy in my head was going, "Are you shitting me?" Boy, was that generous. Now, generosity to a fault is something that is, you can hang on Gary. I've gone into that before, and I'm not going to embarrass anybody living today. But he was often generous to a fault. This case, as he often lamented later, way too generous. And I understood where it was coming from, because we were making tons of money and having to send a huge, obscene amount of it out the door every month to somebody that really didn't have half of it coming. But anyway, that's all under the bridge. Turned into ice cubes maybe downstream. All right, let's see what we got here next. Yeah, it wasn't really favoritism. It was basic and much more advanced. And one was aimed at children. And it started with 1E, but found the more rules like B and X, Beckman, and morals or whatever that is. Was it truly just a way to appease Arneson? Did I ever play the basic games? I still play the basic game. I still consider myself an OD&D'er at the point where we thought OD&D would get someday. I'm going to take these off and flare again. Okay, I got a few more things here off that one though. So these I wrote bigger, so I don't need my glasses. Okay, let's talk about two of my favorite things that are concerned. Another of my favorite things. One of my favorite things is playing miniatures. Okay, after all, those miniatures indirectly got me involved where I am today, for better or for worse. And sand tables. Somebody said, yeah, I'd mentioned I had one. Yes, I did. And then we'll talk about terrain and how that relates to sand tables. Number one, in my opinion, a sand table is the number one indulgence a miniatures player can give himself. And it's the number one indulgence if he has a wife who doesn't play because they take up a lot of space. Now, mine took up an entire room in the basement in Delavan when I was working at TSR. There was an old Oldsmobile dealership down at the end of the block that had been empty for some years. And so all of a sudden one day somebody started cleaning out the building. And they set out this enormous bench that was bolted together. It had 6x6 legs. I mean, they're huge. And 4x4 brake. You would have thought it was overkill until you found out that they used to take old Oldsmobile engines out and set it on this bench so they could work on them. And I say multiple. That's how big it was. Well, I got a wrench and I took it apart. And I scavenged out the legs. And I scavenged out the frame. And I really didn't need that greasy top. And probably would have burst into flames on several occasions had I used it. So I got those down into my basement. And I built a sand table based on how far I could reach. Now I'm only 5'9". But I thought it'd be stupid for me to build a table in a long dimension that I couldn't reach halfway to. Because there's a lot of things in miniatures, depending upon the rules you see, there's hidden things. You shouldn't be walking down to the other end of the table and see what he's got behind his bushes, and behind his tree lines, or behind the hill slope, or whatever. So I figured, okay, standing on tiptoes, I could reach this far. Reaching across was no problem. So you should decide if you're going to build one out of, wood. Don't make it longer than you can reach halfway. It just doesn't work right. And of course, give me the golden triangle or whatever. I think mine was probably, 4.5 by 7, maybe. See, I'm giving you these good ideas on the size based on the mistakes I made. I think it was about 4.5 wide and about 7 feet long. And what I did was I reassembled the frame and those big legs. And I got I got a couple sheets of very heavy particle board. And I made the top on the top of the frame and those monster legs out of particle board. Very heavy particle board. I think it was 3/4, it might have even been an inch. And then I coated that with a sheet of plastic. I covered that with a sheet of plastic. All the way around, wrapped it, stapled it here, stapled it a few times in the middle, and would put silicone down each place where I stapled it, so that I maintained the water integrity for the reason that you use water with a sand table. That's why it's either got to be in a basement with good ventilation, second or third floor with good ventilation, and that's not a good idea with the weight involved. Out in the garage, okay, the ventilation is necessary because the sand gets watered. All right, we've got the base, we've got it covered. Then I took, I went to the lumber store and I bought a bunch of, I guess they'd be about 3.5. Yeah, they were probably marked as 4. And I cut those all the way around the edge, so it gave a lip. It had a lip about like this. And I made sure that that was above, so it was also water resistant, waterproofed. And then, of course, I filled it with, clean, sterile play sand. Bag after bag after bag, till I had about this much. You don't really need any more than that. Maybe I had about that much. Now, you fill it with sand, but before you fill it with sand, make a cover. Use 1/2-inch ply, put a couple of laths on the bottom so it fits down into the top and doesn't slide back and forth. Can make it a little wider if you want. And now you got a great gaming table or train table or slot car table. Trampier and I used to smash little slotless race cars against the cement wall all the time. Ideal gave me a whole box of them, and we managed to break about 12 or 15 of them. Anyway, you want this cover because if you have a cat, if you have kids that can reach up there and play, you don't want that sand, number one, full of cat shit, or number two, all over the floor. So put on a cover. Now, on the day you want to play in the morning, you take the cover off, you set it on the side. You get your hose. Now you got to have a hose. That's why another consideration. Or else you got to have a big damn sprayer. But what you want to do is you want to wet the sand. Wet sand sculpts. Hills, dales, valleys, rivers. Colored sand. Used to be able to get that stuff all the time. Sand art and all that arty-farty hippie crap. Blue stuff makes good rivers. And when you mix it all back into the sand later, it's like it wasn't there at all. But you wet it down. And you go to work. Now, I haven't met a cat yet that'll jump up in the wet sand and take a dump. At least none of mine have, and I've had several during the time I had that table, because I moved that table, took it apart, and moved it here to Ohio. I was so in love with that table. So anyway, you go to work, you come back, you get a mister. If there's anything's too dry, get a little mister. Sculpt your hills, you sculpt your terrain. Put in your buildings if you have buildings. Put on your trees and your bushes, whatever. Now, Tramp and I mostly played micro armor. So our giant pine trees were only about that tall, and our tanks were this big. That's a bridge layer. Okay, World War II bridge layer. So our terrain was minimal in height differences. Okay, we didn't need to hide much. We were just little tiny tanks about this tall. Now, if you're playing 25 millimeters or 15 millimeters in that, yes, then's when you need the slightly larger sand, or pull extra sand to the areas you need it by evenly sculpting. You'll find those flat paint stirring sticks, or old broken yardsticks or rulers are real nice for bringing the sand to where you need it for an extra, height or whatever. And then you can go back and screw around with the rest. Because once the sand is damp, it sculpts, and it'll generally stay, dry or wet and long enough to at least get the game done, several hours, basically all day. And then that's where the ventilation comes in, because when you're done, you want to put the top back down as soon as it starts to dry out, if you got cats or kids. Now, if you don't have those problems, all you got to worry about is bugs and mice. Well, that's your call. But I love sand table. Still wish I miss it. We've redone our entire basement. There's no room for it. I have a dry land equivalent of a massive cover on my pool table, and a cushion that brings the bed of the table up even with the rails. So I have a big gaming surface again, but I don't have the sand. The sand allows you to put in terrain. Now, terrain has a wide variety of definitions. Terrain is trees and bushes and hedgerows. Terrain's ruined buildings, and terrain is not just hills. It's more the accoutrements. That seems to be what it means today, which is okay. I don't care. And you don't need much when you're playing the small scale stuff. You don't really need any if you're playing the really small scale stuff. If you're playing 25 millimeters, okay, you use the HO buildings and stuff we used to convert. Well, now there's a really neat, really exciting wave going on, and that's Jolly Blackburn, who I keep talking about. I know, no, he doesn't pay me. He's been talking recently about people go, oh, that's pretty neat. Where'd you get it? A 3D printer? Oh, and they turn up their nose. He calls them terrain snobs. That I guess if you got a $300 printer and you go ahead and get the blueprints for those 3 buildings in the town, that's not as worthy as spending 12 hours building them out of a model kit or carving them with a hot wire out of styrofoam. That's more worthy. Nah, that's just crafty, as in crafts, arts and crafts. Sand tables are the ultimate. Gary Kahn puts together a sand table for the weekend every year, and it's in constant use because it's such a luxury, it's such a novelty. But again, you can build it. It just takes some sense. Remember that when you put water in it, it's going to be heavier. Remember that it's every bit as heavy in the middle as it is on the ends, and so brace accordingly. If you got a good dehumidifier, game's over. You crank that baby up to zero, up to max, and it dries the sand faster for you and sucks the moisture out of the air if you're indoors and have to deal with that. So that's all about sand tables. I miss mine. Oh, do I miss mine? I miss my micro armor too, but that was getting impractical. I already told you about the museum that's building a new display and everything with micro armor I donated to them. That might be dedicated this fall. Woo, I get to go. All right, let's see what else we got here. Oh, somebody wanted to know about adventure gaming. I thought I'd talked enough about that. I'm never as comfortable talking about my own stuff as I am stuff I worked on with others. Adventure gaming was the direct result of my leaving TSR on the one hand, and the fact that Glenn Kidd and Gary Gygax really had it in for each other. We all know about my leaving TSR. The thing with Gygax and Kidd, and I say it as friends of both of them before I start here. Let me frame that. When Ral Partha came to Gen Con, when it was in the Horticultural Hall, and I don't remember if it was 75 or 76. All right, I think it might have been 75. I'm not sure. But in any event, I was there. They brought the Wizard on the Quarter. They brought the Death Dealer. They brought the Elven Tower Guard. And I think they brought one other one. And they sold them all in the first day and a half. Just blew the place away. Ral Partha on that day at Gen Con reset the bar for making figures. They were casting more detail into figures than many people could paint into figures. Glenn was a cocky little dude. Well, not dude, little. Glenn's taller than me. Well, not that much, but considerably taller than me. 3, 4, 5 inches. And he's kind of cocky, and he's got a smug a happy face that looks like he's smirking. He isn't always, but it looks like it. If he's feeling proud and pleased as a bunch of this stuff selling and everything, he probably looks like he's smirking. Now, I didn't know this at first. All right, I got to know Glenn over the course of the ensuing years. And anyway, Gary felt that Glenn didn't give him enough deference and respect. Glenn felt that Gary was like, oh, come on, are you kidding me? Aren't we all in this together? And so they didn't hit it off. Came time for TSR to license figures. I argued, I pleaded, I begged, I cajoled, all to no avail. They ended up giving the contract to Grenadier, and as we all know, their stuff could never hold a candle to Partha's. Never could. Not bad figures by the standards of the day. Standards of the day were minifigs that were kind of roundy. And if they were Napoleonics, you had to paint on the facings and paint on the buttons and paint on the collars and the cuffs where Ralph Partha cast them. So there was no love lost there. There was never any pettiness like, not letting Partha get a booth or anything like that. But they kind of walked around each other like roosters eyeing each other. So I left. Don't know how Glenn heard about it, because I didn't tell anybody. I spent a couple of months looking for work in the straight world, but my editorial and writing experience still wasn't understood by the straight world. So Glenn heard about it and said, dude, come to Cincinnati, we'll start our own magazine. We'll be better than the Dragon, or at least as good as. And because he wasn't too sure if that was going to ruffle my feathers. And I said, yeah, okay. And my wife and I traveled here, and we met him and his then wife, and we looked at some houses, and we picked one out. And it's kind of like a TV show today, we picked a house out the same day we looked at them all. And we're still living in it 37 years later. Must have picked good. In any event, I came with the money of Ralph Partha behind me so that Glenn could publish a magazine that he could thumb his nose at Gary. I didn't care, because he gave me the same promise Gary gave me. No editorial interference. He just felt that, he was going to show Gary that, hey, I can make a good-looking magazine too. I'm more than glad to say, yeah, let's do it. So we came here. Now, I was asked, who wrote for me, who didn't. Well, I got all the magazines over here somewhere, and I haven't gone through them in a long time, and forgive me for that. The well-known ones were Tramp gave me some stuff on Titan, and JD came over and gave me some of those, and I just found 3 JD Webster Phineas originals tucked away in the back of a thing full of old unused art, and some used art. If you hear this, JD, get in touch with me, and I'll send them back to you. Of course, if you're still mad at me, maybe I'll just sell them. I don't, we set out to make a quality magazine that would write about any form of gaming. As in Dragon, we weren't getting into some of the weird sex shit that was going on, and we didn't do articles on some of that crap. All right, but as far as mainstream, we did everything. Some authors followed me over. They thought I got a raw deal at TSR. Some of them were just friends. I said, sure, I'd rather write for my friend anyway. And so we set out to make an all gaming magazine, just like Dragon was, all kinds of games. Adventure gaming was a new phrase of the types of games we play. It's not Monopoly, it's not Pachisi, it's adventure gaming. Might be exploring a temple in a board game or chasing pirate ships around each other, but it was adventure gaming as opposed to staid gaming, I guess. I don't know. So I think we did a hell of a job. I got a lot of critical acclaim. And again, I'm really uncomfortable here, but I was asked these questions. We got a lot of good critical acclaim. A lot. Especially when you consider we only managed 13 issues. Every issue sold more than the ones before. That said, We had the misfortune to be doing this in the middle of the failed Republican economic strategy called Reaganomics, where it was supposed to trickle down. And I've gone over this before. Way too many small mom and pop businesses went out of business of all kinds, and a disproportionate sum of them were small hobby shops. I was making money on paper every single month. On paper is not the same as getting paid by my distributors, getting paid by my outlets, getting paid by my advertisers in a timely fashion, because everybody was tight. I'd find another 200 subscription for the next, I'd sell another 200 copies here and there and up some orders and that, and I'd lose 210 because the 2 distributors were going belly up, bankruptcies, all this thing. It's the only reason we went down. We just didn't have any operating capital. And after losing several thousand of my own, I said, that's enough. So we closed it. Made me sad. Let's see. Okay, saving the best for last. This is for the people of D&D Beyond, whatever the hell that is. I got a spot on my left cheek, an identical one on my right cheek, that you're more than welcome to pucker up and osculate the devil out of. I must have missed the announcement of somebody dying and you being anointed as the new god of decision making. This all started again with my stupid boule. And here's something about the boule. Remember earlier I was talking about first rights? Okay, think of that a second. WotC put out 3 lists. 3 times they put out lists of monsters. They said absolutely under no circumstances whatsoever can you use these under the OSG or whatever that's, that game license crap, which I would never work under. And Boule was never on there. And I think I know why. I think they know they don't own it. That's one of the many things in Dragon Magazine that they do not have a copyright on. Which I guess means under current law that I own it since I wrote it and I created it. Now I'm not going to argue with them. I'm not going to try and sue them or any of that kind of crap. But I'm going to tell you to leave it the hell alone on D&D Beyond. It's not pronounced Bullet by whatever moronic frog you got to pronounce that. Who gave you the right to change it? It's printed. Boule. Boule. Not blood. You don't get to change it. You didn't create it. You don't own it. And I'd like to hear back from you. Think you do. Because this would be a fun thing to spend the remaining years of my life determining all the copyright money that you owe other people whose stuff you did take and had no right to out of the magazine. D&D Beyond. The new self-appointed Lords of Creation for role-playing gaming. How do I get that job? I'm bound to be more qualified than you are. And I think on that note, we'll say good evening. If you get a chance to go to see Cirque, Corteo, go. Marvelous night. Wonderful show. I think that's our 4th Cirque that we've been able to see. Very fantastical. See you next issue.